If you've experienced repeated rejection, you've already told yourself why. You're not handsome enough, you don't make enough money, you're not smooth enough, something about you just doesn't land, and you think that you're just being honest about what's happening, that you're recognizing a pattern and solving for it. But what if what you've been interpreting as rejection isn't actually rejection? This is what we need to talk about today, because there's a specific scenario that I see over and over with men, and it's never my intention to gaslight someone out of their experience. But in this specific scenario where they're experiencing repeated rejection, what's actually happening is that nobody's taught them how attraction actually works. And so in those specific scenarios, which is what the framework that I teach is kind of designed to help you navigate through more effectively, when there may be something else going on in the dynamic that we just need to account for so that things can continue unfolding smoothly. If you're new to my work, my name's Courtney Shand, and I love helping men with depth really learn how to step into it and lead the dating space with that. I find that there's not only some extra nuances needed for these type of conversations, but also when a man does step into his depth, he naturally starts attracting a different type of woman, and it sets him up for the types of connections that he's looking for, with both emotional depth and safety, but also that level of chemistry and adventure. And that's what I want for you to experience more often. So this is something that we need to address. There's an analogy I like to use when I'm talking about this, because your experience of rejection isn't necessarily wrong, but it's also not necessarily the full picture. Because back in the day, we used to see the night sky and we assumed that the Earth was the center of the universe. And so everything that we were seeing in the night sky was based on that orientation. It wasn't until we realized that the sun was actually the center of our galaxy that we started to have different ways of explaining the same experiential phenomenon. Because there's a specific situation that I see a lot of men in where they experience rejection, and that's what they're calling it. So that's the problem they're actively trying to solve for. When the reality is that there's a bigger picture at play, and there are some variables that you haven't necessarily known to account for. And this is what we do in the framework that I teach about how attraction naturally builds. I'm not going to go too deep into that because I did a whole video on that already. I'll link it here. What I want to invite you into is a framework where we put the sun as the center of the galaxy and watch that same experience float by from a different vantage point and see what shifts for you naturally. Because I don't see a lot of people talking about it, but attraction actually builds in stages. The way that we teach it is from sensory to sensual to sexual energy. Each one creates the conditions for the next one, and trying to skip steps is usually where the breakdowns occur. But here's where I see most men getting stuck. They're naturally gifted at creating sensual energy. They have depth and presence, and they're able to stay with complexity and nuance, which are all really valuable things in terms of relationships. And the problem that they're running into is that they're offering it to everyone, even if the connection is really fresh and the context isn't necessarily inappropriate. Because what he thinks he's doing is creating connection and being empathetic. And he is, but she's experiencing it as intensity because he's trying to apply the wrong stage at the wrong time. And one of the first ways that this will show up as rejection is she will pull back a little bit, mainly to recalibrate within herself. She's trying to get clear on what it is that she's feeling in that moment and what she would need to go there with him. This is usually when he hears something like, "You're really intense," or "You're very serious." And depending on where he's coming from as he's watching that scene play out across the night sky, he may interpret it as a rejection, or he may be able to see it, identify it for what it is, and keep going. Because I've been saying for years that the recovered nice guy is like 95% of what most women are looking for in the dating space. And it's not that there's something missing or wrong from him. He just doesn't see himself that way. And that's the last 5%. It's just in the wrong context for attraction to gradually build. One of the most painful things is to experience rejection. Viscerally, it is difficult for our nervous systems to be with. And when that is a repeating experience for you, it's painful. And I want to zoom in on what's happening, but just like you can navigate more effectively when you understand where the stars are in the sky, I want to give you a different map to use in terms of navigating what's happening in that experience. And I say that because part of reorienting how you navigate this story is acknowledging that these stories have been here probably longer than the experience that you're currently having. And because we're social in nature, we get a lot of the experience of safety and belonging from the people around us. And when that is threatened in any way, our spidey senses come online. We start picking up on subtler and subtler cues of potential rejection. This is something that you can't help, it's instinctive. And I want to just name it because this is probably happening underneath your awareness. So when we do perceive a potential for rejection or experience it outright, It's like one of those vault scenes in a sci-fi movie where everything starts to click in place and create this impenetrable wall. You pull back to protect yourself, you hide or try to fix the thing that you are seeing as the problem, the reason that you're giving that you're being rejected. I always say it's like taking a magnifying glass into your inner world and microscopically looking at every potential flaw, because you know they're there, even if that's not specifically what someone else is pointing at. But the problem is you're now doing to yourself the thing that you were afraid of someone else doing to you, which is why when you experience this on repeat, it's not just a repeat injury, it's a compound impact. And just like our physical body has many mechanisms to adapt when there's repeated injury, our emotional body does too. And it'll show up as the bracing that I talk about on this channel a lot. Viscerally, you're going to come across as guarded and a little rigid, and your experience feels like you're unanchored, like it's up if she likes you and not if she doesn't. And this is a really exhausting cycle to be in, which is why I want to give you a new map to use so that you can prevent it from happening when it's not necessary. Because you do have some options in this moment. You can either double down on what you've been doing, and if that's been working for you, great. And if it's not, what I would suggest is that you need a somatic element to your process, because the experience that you're having isn't just in your mind, it's actually happening in your entire physiology. You're bracing against a potential of rejection is something that's wired into your nervous system, which is why you can watch a video like this and nod along, but in that moment, you hit this ceiling, this threshold that you can't quite get through. That's not actually a sign that you don't understand or that you need to just figure it out. That's a sign that the work actually needs to reach a deeper level for you to experience what you're hoping for. And that's why I created Grounded, which is really designed to help you get to that depth and heal at that level. Because what I've seen is that when a man does learn how to stay present in those moments where he used to perceive rejection and maybe brace or numb out in some way, those sensations actually become less overwhelming for him. When you have a framework to work within that helps you understand why you're doing something and a new way of doing it that gives you the result that you're after, you can stick with the process long enough to build mastery. You're no longer reacting to the same things. And instead, you're building mastery, kind of a resilience to rejection. And this doesn't necessarily happen all at once, depending on your lived experiences. But I do find really consistently that you start sensing into what's actually happening, whether it's uncomfortable because it's what you were hoping for, or it's new information that you need to be responding to. Either way, you'll have a clearer sense of how to move. When to stay, when to advance, how to read what's actually going on. And you'll find that you do prevent a lot of what you were experiencing as rejection the more that you practice this. Which, can you imagine what you would go after if you weren't afraid of the potential for rejection? This is what I love seeing men get to do, is go after things that they previously didn't, not because they weren't capable of it, but because they were using an old map to interpret the situation that was playing out. They were holding themselves back and playing small, even in situations where everyone around them could see that this was such a great fit for them and that they were so qualified for it. And it's because understanding something conceptually and being able to stay present when your nervous system starts scanning for potential rejection are not the same. Going back to the example where she pulls back a little bit and is feeling into what it is that she needs to go a little deeper with you, when all you know is to interpret what she's doing as rejection. We've already discussed where that leads us and what this is doing for her when you learn how to stay present with those experiences. Because what you're doing is, instead of hiding, you're learning how to contain yourself, to be with your experience and process it through in a somatic way. It's creating a level of contrast for her to be able to see the difference between you and her. And I talk about this a lot on this channel, that contrast is sexy. That is what women are looking for across from a masculine man, is the level of difference between the two of you. That's what creates that polarized attraction. It also gives her space to feel what it is she's actually feeling. And this is how intimacy builds to something sturdy enough to hold a real relationship. And it shows a level of self-discipline and self-awareness, that he's aware of what he's experiencing and is able to be with it without rushing it or leaking it everywhere, which is not only attractive as a trait, but it's actually foundational to allow attraction to build. And for her, the more that you're able to learn how to be present with the experience that you're having and not make it mean rejection, means that you're able to stay present with what's actually happening. And I know what this feels like to be across from, and it's an experience that a lot of emotionally mature women are looking for. And it's the reason that I brought Andrew in to teach this, because this is exactly what he was doing when we were starting to get to know each other. And because it stood out to me in such contrast to everything else that's being taught, I was like, you have to come teach this to my community. This would be so helpful for men to understand. Because as a recovering nice guy himself, this took him about 10 years of lived experience to map the terrain and understand it well enough to be able to teach it. So I love that he brings that in our groups and one-on-one from a lived, embodied perspective. Because the most consistent pattern that I see for the men who find our work are, again, already very skillful at that sensual energy. They're just not aware that they're being indiscriminate about it because of the map that they've been using. And so when they're experiencing a repeated rejection, what they actually need to learn is how to open up more of their awareness to that sensory space. And if you've learned how to disappear in a relational context, or be safe or non-imposing, this is probably something you need to learn as well. Because when she can't feel you, she has nothing to move towards. And being able to stay present in that moment instead of perceiving it as rejection is going to give you the information that you actually need in order to see how to move through that situation. And what I've found in my own experience is that the moments when we need the most steadiness is usually the times that we are the least able to generate it for ourselves, which is why this is the work that we do in a one-on-one and a group context, so that you can actually experience something different in your nervous system. Like I said, it took Andrew 10 to 15 years of leading himself through all of these triggers, which is why our intention is to collapse time. And that's really what happens when you're working with someone who's walked that path before, is that you can move faster and allow yourself to go beyond where you can take yourself. And what I love most about helping people who have experienced that repeated rejection is that when you understand what's going on, both internally and in the dynamic, it creates agency. It takes the pressure off when you can see what's happening. And when you can see what's happening, you know what to do. When you know what to do, you can relax. When you relax, you naturally start exuding the very characteristics that are innate to you, that the emotionally mature women are actively looking for in the dating space. And when you're present enough to allow the connection to unfold naturally, attraction becomes a sequential cycle that you can watch happening and know how exactly to move through it. And not only that, but when you are stable within yourself in any situation, when things are no longer a good fit and you need to part ways with someone or an environment, it's clear, it's not personal. What you've been experiencing as rejection usually is an element of haziness to it, where you're not able to see things clearly. And that's what causes that spiral. But when you have that inner stability, you start to see things outside of you more clearly, because you're no longer bracing for and doing the very thing that you're afraid of happening. And if you're ready to reorient how you've been navigating from a place of inner stability, I would invite you to check out Bold. Move Like You're Unrejectable. It's a masterclass that I created that's self-study. You can find it on my website, and I'll put it in the description below. Or if you want more of a group or one-on-one support, you want to check out Grounded or our one-on-one resources. I'll put all of that in the information as well. And as always, I hope this was helpful, and I think you might like this one as well.